Awesome. Hello, and thank you everyone for joining us for Career Day, sponsored by Hitmarker. Hope everyone is having a great day, and welcome to the How to Get a Job in Esports panel. Big shout outs to Twitch Student, Uconnect for organizing all this, and to both Cloud9 and Hitmarker for joining us on this panel and providing their insight. The way this panel will be organized is that we will first be going over the hiring process, going into the resources candidates can utilize to really find a career and job in esports, and then finally the collegiate esports experience and how that works with everything. So let's begin with intros. My name is Ricky Jimenez. I am the business development manager at Uconnect Esports and just recently joined Cloud9 as their events assistant intern. Woo! So next we'll go on to May and then go down from there.
Awesome. Hi, I'm May Gebert. I am the operations manager at Cloud9, and I am also the head of Training Grounds, which is our youth esports development program.
Hi, everyone. My name's Richard Huggan. I'm the managing director of Hitmarker.
Hi, I'm Emily Gonzalez-Holland. I am the director of marketing at Cloud9 and oversee our social media, events, community, and website teams.
All right, awesome. Thank you all for joining us. So our first question will be about the hiring process. So many students are passionate about esports and disregard gaming as a possible career path because they don't feel like their major or work experience is relevant. So for all of you, starting with May, how important is your university major and GPA in the gaming and esports industry?
I think it really depends. If you have like a very specialized field, like say you're in like business or finance, and you've like that's when all your studies have been about, any sort of business type job that you see in like any business field, not including esports, right? Just like any sort of business that it can apply to esports. Like these orgs, as they grow up, as we get bigger, we sort of have to structure ourselves just like any corporation, any organization. So you see all those positions that you see in sort of like standard business happening in esports all the time now, right? You're going to see more HR, you're going to see different management levels, you're going to see project managers, you're going to see multi-person finance teams, supply chain people for merchandise. So really, if you went into school with an idea of doing something, especially in like the business field or the creative field, oftentimes your work experience will directly transfer over. But on the other side of that, if it doesn't, that's okay too. Like my major is not in anything that's esports related. It's forensic anthropology. So it literally has nothing to do with esports. But there's a lot of skills that I learned in it as far as like ethnocentricity and being able to have like a really good cultural understanding of like different places around the world and how to deal with people that was really helpful in that. So your studies are important in whether you can figure out if you can apply it to the job. And that's like sort of on you to say and like really critically examine your skills and say like, here's what I know how to do. And when it comes to running business or when it comes to doing content or when it comes to, even dealing with people, like I have this skill set that I learned in school or from volunteering in, collegiate esports organizations that you can apply it to any job you want.
That leads me perfectly into what I wanted to discuss. So like May, my degree as the bachelor's degree that I have has nothing to do with the job that I now have in esports. It was in traditional sport and that was my original background. And I really haven't found it a barrier because also, as May said, there was a lot on those courses that translated really nicely to the job that I have now. I ended up in a professional environment where I was kind of leading teams and managing people. And obviously a lot of that it's the same from industry to industry and job to job. It's ultimately communication, what it mainly boils down to, and organizational skills, which I think is a major thing that you can pick up at university. But just that last thing that May touched on, where finding at Hitmarker becomes more and more important as more and more people graduate and more people want to get into esports. It's what you do while you're at university, other than just getting the GPA and just getting that qualification. Orgs now want to see you kind of being involved in collegiate esports activities. They want to see you doing things outside of your studies where you're interning like you are now, Ricky. I think it's a great thing to be interning. That was a major thing for me. I was able to do a great internship that lasted a year, and that directly led me on my career path from where I went to after that. So as much as the GPA, I wouldn't worry too much about the actual major that you have. I would worry more about what are you doing in your downtime, if you have downtime, and can you do something that is esports related that will translate into a future career.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that kind of also, like, to piggyback off of both of what you've both had said, my goodness, words are hard. I also have a degree that doesn't necessarily directly translate to esports. So I have my bachelor's of science in human factors psychology, and I worked within serious games, and I thought I was going to go into game development. I wanted to create training and simulation to help people in like the healthcare space. I found that my passions for esports just like pulled me a little bit harder, got involved with kind of the collegiate side, but also just the online tournament organizing side, and was able to diversify my experience while still pursuing my research degree. I was able to balance both skill sets and both loves to the point where once I left my field that I was working in after I graduated, I was able to take the skills that I learned and take that to Cloud9 and say, hey guys, I really want to bring a user-centric design mentality and data-driven approach to your social media and community needs, of which they found value in, and I became the community manager originally at Cloud9. So there are ways that, to echo May and to echo Richard here, that are really important for you to think about translating, and to continue to pursue the passions that you have in school, and also to allow yourself to diversify those experiences. Like May highlighted, her ability to have kind of this cultural relevance and understanding of working with people has applied greatly in her operations and management and development of training grounds. The ability that I have to create research design and to think with a data-driven approach allows me to lead my social media teams and community teams to make data-driven decisions that are, potentially, helping us grow our different channels. So there are definite ways for you to balance what you want to pursue in school, kind of traditionally speaking, with what you want to look to translate and apply to postgraduate, while also getting that experience. I worked 15 hours in a research lab for my major, but I also worked 15 hours after school in an online tournament setting, building up that experience. So diversify. It's the huge, big thing here. And your major is what is kind of like important to you. Find what's important to you and then apply that.
Yeah, and I just want to add on a little bit, because my major is, like everyone else's, not relevant to esports at all. It's actually public admin, which is more centered around like government. But there's a lot of skills I kind of learned there, where when it comes to backing up an argument or like a decision choice, there's a lot of things that skills that may not apply from your major, but there are ones that are really good and can really help you become better. And I think the diversity when it comes to esports adds a lot to how unique and how great it is. So going on to the next thing, what are some of the most important things you guys look for when hiring someone?
Ooh.
May can start.
Yeah, that's
or
a
Emily.
big question.
It's a good one.
Yeah, it's a great question. May and I were actually talking about this earlier today. So one of the things that we really look for specifically is whether or not you have diversified your experience, and also how you represent that on your resume, your cover letter, or your outreach is also really important. So finding ways to kind of narrow down how you're communicating your experience, and kind of, you don't need to have a resume that's like from here to here. Find what is relevant when you're speaking to an organization or speaking to a specific application, and be able to kind of illustrate that skill set very specifically. If you have a background in data science, but you're applying for a social media position, find a way to illustrate how a project that you did in data science applies directly to how it could work in an esports organization's social media, strategy development. So I would say that there are a multitude of ways to kind of illustrate how you translate these skills and show how you perform those skills to the job that you're applying to.
So for me, I think we were hiring fairly recently, and we were hiring 4 people for the same role, which was kind of interesting because it was the same position ultimately, but we wanted to find 4 people who could in the future go on to be a bigger part of the company and to do more things at the company. So one of the big things we looked for is, coming back to what is now the buzzword after just 10 minutes, is the diversification of the whole experience that people had. We wanted to find 4 different people if we possibly could, because then we could put somebody into one department, hopefully to lead that department in the future. We could put somebody somewhere else. So we wanted to try and find 4 real unique individuals who had their own skill set. But that was kind of secondary to ultimately what every hiring manager wants. And just the plain truth of it is that you want somebody who can do the job, ideally from day one. And it sounds super simple to say that, but in esports, most companies are startups. Not many of us are running profitably, and we don't have a lot of money to spend. So it's really crucial that you're getting every hire that you make right, because it's very costly in terms of time and money if you don't get it right. So the first facet is just you need to understand what your job is, or what the job that you're going for is as a candidate. And you need to be really confident that, at least if you can't do everything that they're asking you to do right out of the gate, you're doing something to show that you are keen to learn. So for us, we do a lot with software. So we use a lot of different software tools for social media, kind of like what Emily said. And we wanted people who were familiar with that, so it saved a bit on the training at the beginning. And when people weren't familiar with the software, in the cover letter, they would often say, I'd never heard of this piece of software before, but since reading the job description, I've taken the time to learn about it. I downloaded it. I've set up a test account where I've been practicing. That always really, really impresses me when someone takes the time to kind of familiarize themselves, because I think that gives you an idea of the person, that they're self-aware enough to know that they can't do specifically what we need them to do from day one. So they're taking it upon themselves to learn. So I think being able to do the job is obviously the main thing. If you feel like you can't tick quite all of the boxes, just showing a willingness to learn even before you get the job is amazing, and it always goes down really well.
That's huge. 100%.
Yeah, and I would even follow up with, that's something that I look for in resumes. Like when people talk about like internships or when they start a new job, if they put there that they like had to learn a new system in order to fulfill a job, that's always really reassuring to me, because I know that that they're used to that process and they have like the initiative to do it themselves. So yeah, I agree that that's really important. For me, when I'm looking at resumes, right? It's a little bit daunting when we got our internship resumes. I think like the smallest amount of applications that we got for a position was like 700. So having to deal with like 700, I didn't know what to do. I was like, I have 700 resumes. Like, how do I spend time? Like, I have to hire someone in 2 weeks. Like, I have another, like my whole job. How do I do that? And I called my friend who works HR to like a university, and she said, when we hire, like, this is what we do. We download all the resumes, we key in the keywords that we put in the job posting, and you just go through and you mark every resume that has that. You code in those keywords, and at the end you have like a number at the end of like each resume is scored. And that's how I ended up doing it, just because when it became that sheer amount of number, there really is sort of no thing. So I think that making sure that you read listings, like you read the job listing, right, and look and really pay attention to the keywords that they're putting in there, as far as skills, as far as experience, anything that it says in there that you can see, and anything that you could take and sort of match with your resume is really going to help you sort of like getting through that initial buffer of just like the scan. Yeah, and then always, if they ask for a cover letter, I think always put a cover letter, because if they didn't want a cover letter, they wouldn't have put a cover letter in the first place. And I think that some people think it's like optional, when it's like, please, if wanted to touch cover, if it says it, like, it means that that's the way that the hiring person wants to go through, that like that's their personal process, right? That like they like the cover letter process. So always do it if it's on there.
I think that's a huge point, and definitely because we kind of see the overall picture from hiring companies and candidates. The cover letter is so undervalued, and we kind of hammer this message home all of the time, because the other thing that I should have mentioned is that people always want passion as well. It's like every hiring manager we speak to, it's either number 1 on the list or number 2 on the list. They want somebody who loves esports and who knows about the scene, and specifically who knows about their specific little org or their specific little sector in the industry. So I bet it's not hard to find, thousands of passionate people for Cloud9 by the sounds of it, but when you're a smaller company like us in kind of a weird location for esports in the north of England, we look for passion above all else, because we want people who recognize that coming to work for Hitmarker, it's kind of hard work and it's a bit of a grind. A lot of the work is very data driven and very manual, but it serves a purpose because we're trying to do something for the community to kind of help people directly one-on-one. So when we were seeing people saying like, I would love to work for Hitmarker because I'm passionate about helping people get into esports and things like that, that's kind of what you want to hear from the beginning of a cover letter. You don't want to see a generic copy paste cover letter that just is like, this is my name, this is what I have done, I would like to do this job. It's kind of like, I want somebody to smack me in the face and say, I would love to work for your company, and you need to give me a chance and like read the rest of this 100, 300, 400, 500 word cover letter that I've written for you. So passion is huge, and the cover letter is enormous, like enormous.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's definitely a lot of thought that really needs to be done when applying to a certain position. So just to get a better idea for people watching this and interested in a career, what are some common red flags or mistakes applicants make that they can avoid? And try your best to make it quick because we're a bit short on time.
Yes. First thing is if they don't spell the organization's name right, or if it's a generic repeat and they put "Dear Team Liquid, I'd love to apply," and I'm Cloud9, and that's a huge common mistake. That avoid that at all costs. Please proofread.
Definitely, that is a huge one as well. Yeah, I can definitely nod along in agreement with that one.
And esports is spelled with the lowercase s. Do not put the uppercase s. Do not put a hyphen.
Yeah. And people might watch that thinking like this is super nitpicky things to pick out, but again, we hear that all the time, because if you aren't even spelling the word right, that kind of instantly sets alarm bells off in the hiring manager's mind. It's like, does this person really know about the industry and do they really follow it? So it sounds super picky, but ultimately that could end up with your resume in a rejection pile, unfortunately.
Awesome. So I also think that there's a stigma when it comes to esports that everyone has an idea that you need to know someone in order to get in. So I'm curious in terms of like, how important do you think networking actually plays into finding a career?
As someone who networking is really important. I don't think that networking only means though finding people that have like relative value in esports space and like attaching to them. Every sort of like networking connection that I had that got me to where I am was just somebody who I knew in the community, who knew other people. And when someone else was looking for somebody for a volunteer position, they were like, "Hey, May's really good at this. Like, May, you should like look into this. Like, I think you'd really like it." And then I was just like, "Okay, I'll try it." And that just progressively went forward and until the point where I happened to join an organization, Heroes Hype, that was run by somebody who worked at an org Unis, worked at Cloud9, and it was separate from Cloud9. It was something that it was her personal passion project, and I just sort of started there because I wanted to help with tournament organizing. And I can very much say that the reason I have my job is because I impressed her so much with my work ethic that when it came for Cloud9 hiring, there was a direct recommendation. And so it wasn't like I knew someone had met someone that got me any position. It was the fact that people had seen my work ethic and the things that I had done and they bought into and also believed in me and endorsed me to people that they felt like could give me opportunities because they felt like I could actually do it. So it wasn't just who I knew, it was who I had impressed with my work ethic.
I couldn't say it better myself. May put it beautifully. It's 100% on the merit of the hard work that you put in and the relationships that you consistently build and look to create outreach for. I personally benefited very much from reaching out to individuals to create mentorship opportunities, and it's something I'm very passionate about. I'm very receptive to kind of a mentor-mentee relationship, of which I try to offer my employees, as well as kind of create our internship internally, like our system around mentoring and mentorship. So if you're looking to kind of create that relationship and create that network, you can also benefit by learning new skills and by creating that mentor-mentee relationship too.
Yeah, it's really good points again. And I think that first one is something that gets overlooked a lot. People just think networking means connecting with everyone on LinkedIn that they can find that works in esports and sending like a generic hello message. So I think finding ways to show value is really crucial. Like here in the UK, unfortunately, there aren't that many opportunities to do that. Like you guys are in a great location to be able to do that with people who are going to be able to see the value and kind of recognize that. In the UK here, in terms of the bigger events, you're talking about a handful a year and like 0 at the minute, obviously. So I think it's a lot harder depending on the location that you're in. But if you are isolated and you don't feel like you're in the right spot, then Twitter and social media can be a really valuable tool, but it then becomes about how you approach people and kind of how you make that introduction, because they might have never heard of you before. Ideally, you know somebody that knows them who can make a co-introduction for you. It's a lot harder over text, but we tend to find, and what we tend to hear is that a lot of people in esports are really willing to give time to speak to younger people, but the messaging has to be correct and you can't be demanding too much time because everyone is working 60, 80-hour weeks already. So it's a lot to try and help people on top of that as well.
Obviously, networking does play a role when it comes to finding careers. What are ways that people who are looking to find jobs in the industry can start that relationship before the hiring process?
I mean, I have a lot of people reach out through like DM or email, and like whether we've like connected on Twitter or something before and had some interactions, they felt comfortable reaching out to me. And so like I do a lot of like resume reviews, to be completely honest, of just like, hey, like these are my initial gut reactions. Also like when people have like really specific questions, sort of like a broad, like, how do I get a job in esports? Is like, how much time do you have? Because like I don't have that much time. But if it's like a really specific question, like, hey, I'm interested in this and I'm sort of tossing up like taking my major this way or this way. Like, what do you think the best option would be? Like, that's like a really focused question that I think is easier for somebody to like think about for a little bit and then like really give really good advice. So if you have questions, like try to make it as specific as possible, where it's not like on the person to sort of like do research and try and like give you this whole like breakdown and history of everything of information that you can probably find online, right? But if it's something that's like personal and specific and it's very focused, it's easier for somebody to like give you that mentorship advice.
Exactly. And I would say that like really bolstering how you are kind of like working in these online community spaces, Twitter is kind of like the home of esports a lot of the time. So creating those kind of authentic conversations and interacting with these different industry professionals is a really great way to kind of have your name stick out when you're doing that kind of common just conversation and interaction about things that, you know, you might mutually share some interests on. Maybe it's a game that you are interested in that the marketing director is also tweeting about and is interested in. And you can find those kind of real connections. And then, like May said, kind of drilling down on what it is that you're kind of looking to reach out to create. I know that personally, when I've been reached out to, I've tried to, you know, my best to really spend the time to talk with them and figure out what it is that they're really looking for besides just how did you get into esports? What was your journey? XYZ. I think really finding out what it is that you're wanting to answer and build that kind of relationship with that individual as well could be really empowering and powerful for you as you make decisions in your schooling. And, you know, if you make that next step to, you know, join your collegiate space, or you want to become a leader in your collegiate space, and kind of asking the people who maybe came from collegiate and are really like forward facing about that and kind of tap into those individuals, you know, so on and so forth.
Yeah, definitely. I know we've got to wrap this bit up, but I'll try and just put a fine point on the end of that. Everything's been covered really well, but in those cases where you can't have that kind of organic connection with somebody, we definitely find that even say you apply for a role at Cloud9, and apologies to May and Emily on this one if it's not the case, but what we tend to find is candidates come to us and they're like, do you think it's okay if I could like reach out to the hiring manager or the person that's posted the role, and just to kind of show them that I'm super keen and super passionate about getting the job. And people do that with us when we're hiring, and sometimes people can be a little bit too full on with it, I think, again. So it's about kind of measuring it. I think if you add it and you say, saw you were hiring for this role, I've applied, I would love to learn more about it if you have time, or if you find somebody who's working at a more junior level in the company who's kind of in the role that you're applying to, connect with them and learn more about the role that way. And people, again, are always super happy to help. And that's a nice natural introduction. I've just applied for this role at Cloud9. I would love to get it. Can you tell me a bit about the company and what it's like working there, just in case I get to interview and stuff like that. Even if you don't get the job, you've started a relationship, then you've made a good first impression.
Yeah, I 100% picked my 10 people that I was going to interview emailed them all, and then somebody messaged me on Twitter and had like a really convincing argument of just like how passionate she was, and she wanted to reach out and make sure she hadn't heard anything back. And I was like, it was one of those ones that was like on the borderline anyway, right? And I was like, you know what? She reached out, like she showed initiative, like it's 30 minutes out of my, you know, week. Like I'm going to give her an interview. Like she took the initiative and the time, like I'm going to reward that. And so, yeah, so it definitely does help as long as like you aren't like just like bombarding, but like a really nice, well-crafted, enthusiastic, passionate message, I think doesn't hurt at all. It helps.
Awesome. So that wraps up our hiring process questions. So we'll go into the next topic, which is going to be resources. So what are some resources that people can utilize to find position in esports? And I think Richard can start with this one.
Yeah, this isn't just going to be a plug, but I'll explain kind of how Hitmarker works very quickly and then tell you where else you can go as well to find jobs. So Hitmarker companies come and post directly with us, but we also aggregate from other places as well, which it's just about us trying to provide one single location where candidates can find jobs, and we'll always send the candidate back to the original location of the job, so we don't capture any data or anything like that. We just want to become like a hub for where you can find any job related to esports. That doesn't mean we catch everything though, so we tend to find that the old school things like Indeed US, Indeed UK, Indeed CA are still a really good source for esports jobs. A lot of the bigger companies still use them religiously. LinkedIn is getting better and better. It's a lot of jobs and a lot of mess to wade through on there because there's a lot of recruiter roles and a lot of repetitive roles that get reposted over and over again. So it's a bit of a painful search on LinkedIn, but you can definitely find hundreds of esports jobs per month on LinkedIn if you're looking in the right places. Twitter, when I first started this 3 years ago, used to be a great source for just finding jobs kind of through the grapevine, where people would post in 140 characters at that time, kind of like, I've got this opportunity, it's paid, it's in this location. It seems to be happening less frequently now, I think, because orgs are growing up and people have their own ATS systems and their own methods of hiring now. But scoping out Cloud9's website, all the other orgs' websites that you might be interested in working in, they'll typically have a careers page, and that's typically going to be the first place that you'll find any new job. Following everybody on Twitter, you don't have to message them or anything, but if you're following like May and Emily or anybody kind of in the org who's running a department, they're likely going to tweet about any jobs that they have coming up, or they might even give you a heads up that they're going to be hiring sometime in the future. So it becomes about curating like your follow list on social media as well to kind of find the people that are in the senior positions and figure out if they've got any opportunities. We still know a lot of people get hired through social media without a formal job application process or job posting process. So there's tons of places to look. And network, again, I don't want to take up all the answers before passing it over, but maybe relying on friends and people that you know in the industry is still a really good way to find jobs as well.
So the next one is going to be, there are a lot of events, of course, in esports, maybe not as much now because of COVID, of course, but what events are best for networking and learning? And is there any like big events that any of you have experienced personally that really impacted your career?
For me, it was probably BlizzCon. Just because I was really involved in the Blizzard community, and I think that that's sort of like their big event, where like everyone networks. It's a really open forum. Like you can basically just like meet anybody anywhere, which is really nice. And then DreamHack, I think, is also like a really good one. I think that a lot of the panels at DreamHack are good. I think that the format that you can sort of like talk to people afterwards are good. There's a lot of people that I met at DreamHack Anaheim that are like collegiate students that I still talk to on Twitter, that I've, like done things and sort of like given them merch for collegiate watch parties and stuff, just because like they recognized me or came to the panel and asked me questions and talked about their collegiate esports program, and it got me really excited, and so we kept in touch, and then I sent stuff. So I think like DreamHack is like a really good one because it's pretty casual, it's pretty low key. There's DreamHacks everywhere, which is really nice, like in tons of different places, so it's pretty easy for people to go there. A lot of people that I know, it's pretty easy to get involved in DreamHack too, to like volunteer your time to like help out with tournaments or anything. So I think that like those are two big ones for me that I think are great.
Yeah, I would say that the event that had the most impact on me was PAX West, actually, and then kind of Blizzard's BlizzCon second to that because I was also really involved in the Blizzard community. I would say that PAX West was much more like general gaming, but I was able to actually meet a lot of the people that I had been volunteering and working with in the kind of online tournament space for the very first time at some of these events, and create deeper, kind of more meaningful connections with them kind of in person and build up on those networking opportunities with them. And then BlizzCon also was just a really like incredible opportunity to do kind of something similar, but also meet some more leaders in the industry as well through those opportunities. I would also say DreamHack is a really great way to do that, just like May said. And in particular, I would say that, yeah, BlizzCon and PAX West were the ones that really kind of impacted my career and career growth, and actually kind of allowed me to make the leap to moving from the East Coast to the West Coast in order for me to kind of like get on my feet and really like pursue full-time a career in esports.
I'm just listening to you guys talking about all those fantastic events like longingly, thinking I would love to travel. We were planning on actually coming this year to PAX and TwitchCon and all that good stuff, but obviously that all fell by the wayside. Again, here in the UK, and I don't think there'll be too many people watching at this time of night, but it's hard because there aren't that many events focused around networking and learning specifically. But Esports Insider do quite a lot of good stuff. Sometimes the price point can be a bit much because it's focused on industry people and people who are in quite senior positions, but they seem to be putting more focus on trying to get more junior people in the space to come to their events, whether it's volunteering, like May mentioned, you can do at the DreamHack events. There's a lot of volunteering opportunities. And I spoke to a lot of the kids who were volunteering at the London event last September, and they were just loving it because they had most of the UK and European leaders kind of the companies in one room, and they were either helping them get from A to B if they were speaking on panels, or they were interviewing them after the show. And it kind of instantly gives them facial recognition with somebody who could be a big player in the future. So volunteering at ESI events is huge. Volunteering at any UK event, I think, is something I would hugely, hugely advocate for. But at the moment, digital events like this one are popping up all the time. We try and get involved as much as we can whenever there's a careers focus, but you have to be looking out for kind of any digital event that's taking place, especially when it's free like this one. It's like it's a must attend, because after this you might connect with us on LinkedIn or Twitter, or you might jump in the Discord, and it's chances that you get to talk to people that you would never otherwise get to have. So yeah, we're all digital at the minute, so this is definitely the way forward for now.
Yeah, and a lot of places are also having to transition to digital. So like they're going through like the same process, and how do they continue? So like just like specifically like UK too is like there's a lot of sort of like gaming bars and stuff that are popping up in the UK, right? And I'm like they have to run tournaments and like they need help, and so like it's sometimes good like to get involved. I think tournament organizing is like really close to my heart because like that's where I sort of like got my experience. And like people always need tournament organizers, and as long as you're like an organized person, it's pretty easy to be a tournament organizer and like do administration for tournaments, and like or if you can do graphics, if you can do production, like there's so many things you can do for tournament organizing. So like ask local sort of like game places near you, like wherever you are, like if you have a PC center or a gaming center, like, and see if they need help, even just like running production, because maybe it's the skill that they don't have, but you could like build something for them, and then if they see value in you, like they may bring you on, because like you sort of like give them money value by bringing something that they are already doing. So just things to think about.
So that's going to lead us into our next topic. We already touched briefly on this about the collegiate esports experience. So many students are currently tunnel visioned on esports as a career, to the point where some are working part-time hours with no pay or volunteering without career direction. What is your advice to students who find themselves stuck with no visible pathway forward?
I think that you should always like value yourself. Like volunteering should only like take you so much of your time, right? You shouldn't. When I volunteered, like I had a full-time job that I was doing sort of like esports stuff on the side. So it was something that I was passionate about and I loved doing. So volunteering was okay. And I was still like getting those skills. But once you get to a point where you have like a certain amount of skills, like you really need to sort of like transition to like having a job, right? And like maybe that your first job isn't in esports, but if something that translates to esports, as long as you have that passion and you're still like involved in that space, but you're getting real work experience and another thing, like no one's going to not hire you for a job that comes up because you've had another job, right? Like with with interns or anybody, like I want somebody who has a volunteer esports experience or even paid esports experience, but probably also has real world job experience, right? Because that's like another skill is time management and like being on time and showing up for all these things and work and having a manager and responding to a manager and sort of like having that structure of what having a job is also really important. So it's not just about esports, it's about like sort of that real world, like, yes, I've had a job before as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, just like May said, really understanding like your value and your worth in the space is a huge part of it. And having the opportunity to kind of speak to that and create a relationship with whomever you're working with on the volunteer side or on an internship side and saying, hey, like for real now, we're going to be trying to get a career in esports after this. What do I have to do to make sure that that can happen? What can I do in this internship or in this volunteer experience to ensure that I am gaining as much out of this as you can with having me on board volunteering and getting experience? So I think having direction a lot of the times is something that you can ask for when you work with these different organizations or with these tournament opportunities or volunteering in your space. And really saying that my goal in this internship or my goal in this volunteer experience is to gain the skills to make this a career. I'd love to work with you on ensuring that those steps can happen. And I think really that's a big part of just understanding your worth in this space and knowing that you're bringing a skill set or you're refining a skill set. And then if you are getting other job experience and work experience, I worked previously for 2 years in the military doing simulation. It was what I went to school for, all the while doing esports kind of on the side. And I did everything that I could to look at what esports was doing, what organizations were kind of missing, and try to identify that so that I could work on it in like my real job, and then bring it to my volunteer esports job and kind of like trial and test it out. That's kind of where I even came up with how I was going to translate my career and previous experience to esports in the first place, was because I was able to take the volunteer environment I was in, apply my kind of real world experience and test it until I found something where I was like, I could actually bring this data-driven approach to an organization that may be missing it and really, hone in on that.
Yeah, that's kind of, it speaks to the knowing your own worth. We always, when people ask us kind of, is this volunteer role worth doing? It's kind of, it's a hard thing to do, to try and get somebody to sit back and think kind of, how much is my time worth and what other things do I have to focus on? And how much benefit is this particular volunteer position going to give me in the long term? That's not an easy thing to answer. And it might be something that you might need to seek advice from for somebody else that in the industry that's a bit more senior. You can show them the job description or you can tell them what they're going to expect you to do. And you could basically say, look, do you think it's worth 5, 10, 15, 20 hours a week? Let's be honest, some volunteer roles, especially some that are posted on our website, which we always have this like moral dilemma about even being allowed to be posted, ask for a hell of a lot from people in terms of time, in terms of an hour's commitment. And it's like, people can't live on nothing. So you're relying on people that either still are living at home with parents and don't have any big financial commitments, which obviously means they're a younger person. But we're finding more and more people who are getting towards kind of 20s, 30s, who might have family commitments and bills. And they're finding that their only route to get into esports is to do exactly what the question is. It's kind of low paid part-time work or unpaid part-time work because they're really struggling to get something related to esports on their resume. If it was me as like a father now with a house and a mortgage and all that fun stuff, I don't have that luxury anymore, but I did when I was a student, and I interned unpaid for 2 years, and that put me on the path to where I could get to. But I was also a full-time student and I worked part-time outside of that as well to earn money. So it's kind of like, you have to be willing to sacrifice, but just be, well, we always say just be super careful about like who you work with, what opportunities you take, and get advice if you can when you're not sure about something.
Yeah, do your research. 100% do your research. Ask questions and ask for time.
And like with internships too, like find out if there is an actual intention to hire after an internship. Like the unfortunate reality is like there's a lot of in esports and in other places, right, that really take advantage of like the intern process. It's really just like an unpaid or a low paid like grunt worker. So when it comes to like those internships, make sure that you can come out of it being like, I built this project, things that like look really great in resumes, because if you have an internship and you show that you have this like really verifiable skills and knowledge base, that's when it's worth it. Where if it's just a bunch of grunt work that is no different than like homework, even if it's with a great company, it doesn't matter because you didn't really learn any skills and it doesn't prepare you for the actual job. So find out how many of what their internship to hire rate is, because like that's really important, whether it's going to be worth your time or not.
I think part of this is also kind of making the most out of your internships or your volunteer hours, because I know, when I volunteered with Cloud9 for the LCS tailgates, I always went to May, and May helped me when applying for other jobs. So for sure, I think it's important to really utilize, the resources that you have to, find a permanent career.
I mean, yeah, Ricky's the perfect example, right? Just to be like, Ricky this, but like Ricky... Yeah. I met Ricky because he was doing an esports panel at his college, and he really impressed me by the way the panel was run. I make the joke that it was like the only panel that I've ever been on where they had water for the panelists that we didn't have to ask for. Like it was just there, and we were just like, this is great. So it's like, so he impressed me with that because it was so well run. He was there to meet us, and it was really great. And so he impressed us. And then when he wanted to do tailgates, I was like, oh yeah, like we know Ricky. We did the panel. It was great. Like I think that we can trust him. So then he came and did tailgates. And then, I mean, like now he's like an official intern with us. So it just like shows that like as you meet people and impress people, it's easier. Like they have that vouch for you. And like, yeah, like Ricky was applying for another job, and he was like, hey, like this is something that you do in your like day-to-day job. Like, can you give me it was like that example of like a really a question that was very specific that I could give like a very thoughtful answer to that I hoped helped the process, or like you learned something. And I think that like that's a really good example of like when you're looking at like internships and volunteering, like how much making an impression matters. So good job, Ricky.
Thank you. So next question is going to be, what are skills? Our collegiate esports leaders often dabble in a variety of roles. And we already talked about diversification in terms of skills. So what are the skills or accomplishments that you look for in former collegiate leaders that you would potentially want to hire? And what roles are these collegiate leaders usually a good fit for?
That's a really great question. I would say that collegiate esports leaders do have a wonderful advantage in being able to diversify their leadership experience. I say that when I look for different individuals in terms of the collegiate space and hiring, I look for people who are stepping into those leadership roles and really taking charge, looking to create new things with this space, saying, when I stepped into this leadership role or this kind of like new position at my collegiate esports organization, like on campus, we created this, and being able to tangibly kind of give examples to that. I would say also looking for collegiate leaders who are wanting to build other people up. So like I kind of mentioned before, mentor-mentee relationships to me are really valuable in this space. So if you are a collegiate leader, or maybe you can't be in a leadership role because of your other commitments in schooling or with work, and a leadership role might just be a bit too demanding, if you find time to be a part of your collegiate space in a mentor and kind of mentee relationship, or kind of fostering that kind of growth and upliftment of the community, I think that those are two really key things that at least that I look for in collegiate leaders as they grow in their space.
I would agree. I think that also it's almost not that it's like a bad thing to go to a school that has like a really established esports program, but being at a school where you say like, I started the esports program, I grew my esports program from this to this. I was part of the fundraising and like creation and built the business plan for the esports center that my school is putting. That shows like so much initiative and that you can handle these like big projects. So I think that there's definitely a advantage to that. Like not that there's an advantage, but there's no disadvantage from being at a school that doesn't have a large esports program and taking a lot of initiative to build it yourself.
Yeah, again, it's a little bit different here in terms of how things work. It tends to be societies at our universities rather than anything too more formal than that. But I've been involved in a couple of them now for about 6 months or so, and I'm super impressed by how much these students take on in terms of organization, especially how they had to adapt to the pandemic, because they had a lot of things planned for over the summer, obviously, when they were going to be off, and then this is the time when tournaments and events can happen, and they had to pivot to doing things online and finding new ways to do things. In terms of tangible skills for us, if we had the luxury to be able to hire graduates tomorrow and I could pick like 5 new people to add to the company, that just being a leader is a heck of a skill to have just straight off the bat, because that means that a lot of things, it means you have to communicate clearly. You have to learn how to get people to buy into you when you're asking them to do things, which is huge, even if you've just got colleagues. If you're not in a leadership position in a company, you still have to find yourself a lot of times asking for help from people and trying to barter with them to get their time to help you achieve what you need to achieve. So that's a super crucial skill. Anything with fundraising and money management is hugely important, because you want to be able to trust people that when you're sending them to events and they've got the company card with them or anything like that, you need to trust that they're going to look after the money, file all the expenses, all that fun stuff for all the bookkeeping side of things. And it's just about being kind of a responsible, trustworthy person, I think. And I think if people are putting themselves in that position to be a collegiate leader, obviously unpaid, dedicating a lot of extra time to doing that for the benefit of their university and fellow students, that already says a lot. But I think specifically that leadership skill is amazing. Money management for us would be big. And then in terms of the fundraising side, that's kind of like biz dev on a scale. It's kind of getting people to buy into your idea. And that's a super, super valuable skill in esports now, when so many companies are struggling to find routes to revenue. So those would be the 3 key things I would take away from it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So this will be our final question before we start the Q&A. So what's the biggest piece of advice that you would give to students who want to work at your companies one day?
I say this a lot, but be in esports for the right reasons. Like, love esports. If you are in it or want to get a job just because you think that like it'll help your clout because you want to be famous, especially like working in an esports org, being on the business side of an esports org, like that's not something that we look for. It's not something that is like one of the, like when it comes to like your application or your resume, is not something that is going to help you at all. Like who you know that's a player, and then if you come to events and it's really obvious that that's what you're trying to do, that doesn't go over well. Like business and the esports side of things are very separate. If you're specifically interested in like player development, that's like really the only time then you're going to be hanging out with players, and in that case, like you're there not because of their players, it's because you really believe in developing human beings and players and being a resource of support for them. So just like make sure that you're really in esports for the right reasons, because this industry is so competitive and people have like really good sort of radars on when people, that's their main objective. So just like really make sure that you're in it for the right reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. I would also say, kind of to echo a lot of the things that we've mentioned on this panel, is to really understand your value and know your worth in the space, and to really kind of take charge and take direction on what you want to accomplish and what you want to do, and really make sure that you communicate that effectively to the people that you're wanting to kind of get attention from in the industry, and kind of build up those relationships and build up that experience. And do not be afraid to kind of knock down the doors and create your own opportunities. Do not wait for somebody to hand you an opportunity in esports. You absolutely can make opportunities. What I brought to Cloud9 did not exist before I brought it to Cloud9, and that is completely okay. That is what this industry is about. This industry is about creating, it's about innovating, and it's about problem solving, and it's about passion. So make sure you're bringing things to the space that you really care about learning and developing on, and really, like May said, be in it for the right reasons, and be ready to grow and be ready to learn.
There's nothing to add to that answer. That was absolutely perfect, other than maybe just work really hard, because esports has some of the most hardworking people I've ever seen across the few industries that I've worked in. So it is hard work. It's not all good fun, unfortunately.
But balance yourself. Knowing your worth is also knowing when to say no and knowing when to put down your phone, put down things, walk away, and have a balanced life and healthy relationships and stay hydrated and posture good. Like, the big part of it.
So I'll also add a bit on this. I think esports is really interesting because there's so much that you can do to it. I feel like a lot of the leaders who come up kind of like identify a problem and build on it. So, you know, I know that Simo is a caster for Valorant, and the way he worked is that he would see the Valorant like Twitter posts, and it would be like a cool little like champion like spotlight, and he would go and he would cast it. And now he's casting for a whole bunch of big companies. That's kind of like how he got his start. And I know Arya, who is our social media intern, he made this amazing Cloud9 video about why Cloud9 should hire him. And I think that's so great to have, where there are a lot of opportunities that you can kind of like make for yourself and be able to get into this space by showing how passionate and, you know, you're in it for the right reasons.
We love our interns.
Yes,
we love our
we do. So the next part will be the Q&A portion. So if there's any questions, feel free to throw it in Twitch chat and we'll answer some. So I have some right here. What does the hiring timeline generally look like? And anyone can feel free to tackle this.
I would say application, like the posting is probably up for a week at most for like our positions, just because we get so many applications that once we hit like 500, we're just like, all right, we got to close this. And then I would say it's usually like 2 to 3 weeks to go through everything, do interviews, second round interviews. So yeah, I probably about like a month is right around that hiring process timeline for us at Cloud9.
Yep, I would agree.
Having a job open a week, it's amazing. Tends to be, I think the average tends to be more like 60 days, but obviously Cloud9 are a pretty exceptional case. In esports, we tend to find jobs are open typically for about 30, but you get some that are open for 60 or 90 days. But I think if you can do your hiring process in a month, that is super efficient, and that's what companies should aim to do. We try and post a description for 2 weeks and then hire within 2 weeks as well. So I think a month is kind of a good thing to aim for.
So this next one is, how can we network during a pandemic? Which is very relevant.
Super relevant. I would say that lean into our social media spaces that we are so present in. Find opportunities in organizations, Discord communities as well. I think Discord is a really great way to like get active and stay active. There's a lot of like organization staff members that will like hang out in Discords, or, you know, for example, Ricky has created these really amazing events over at Cloud9 for our LCS tailgates through kind of like this digital space, or these community family game nights where we have our staff present. And this is a really great way for you to kind of find opportunities to engage and, you know, lean into these kind of authentic conversations that you can have with people online, and find that in the DMs to kind of say like, hey, I admire what you're doing, or I really want to learn more about this. Do you have time to talk about this? And connect, and, you know, connect over text, or you can connect over a Discord, Skype chat, anything like that.
Yeah, orgs are also like really excited and really transitioning to, like Emily saying, doing these digital events as well, just because like we want to reach out to fans, we want to interact with fans. So it's both ways. Like, so just like keep on the lookout for all these things. Obviously, like Uconnect stuff is really good. I think there's going to be more collegiate watch parties that sort of spin up for Worlds and all that, as people like want those opportunities to come together as communities still. And I think that orgs are just going to get more and more involved in collegiate spaces while we're in this pandemic, just because it's like a really great way to talk to students, hang out with students, like share this love together of esports and gaming. And it's like a pretty easy way to do it.
Yeah, I can just reiterate that. I very rarely gotten involved in Discord communities just because of a time thing, really. But during the pandemic, I've been invited to join quite a few, and again, been blown away by how big the communities are and by how much takes place in each of the communities. Like most of them will have like a resume help section and places where they're sharing jobs with each other and things like that. So one bit of advice I could give is go out on your own social media, speak to people that you know, even make a public post to say, does anybody know any Discord communities related to marketing or graphic design or something in esports? You might be surprised what you get invited to through DMs. A lot of them are kind of underground and kept quite private, and it sometimes takes to know someone to get in there. But there's some great groups for creatives and marketing and community managers, so definitely be on the lookout for those. And again, you'll find tons of people willing to help, and there'll be sections in there specifically to help as well, which is great.
All right, so this next question is, what are your initiatives to help women and people of color be more well represented in an industry that really lacks diversity?
I think that there's part of it is personal responsibility, right? Like, I think that it's important to certain people to be very diverse with who they interview, that they're looking for people that just like in their life story have different backgrounds, like regardless of, you don't always know from when you get a resume, right? Like what someone's heritage is, where they're from, whether they're from like a marginalized socioeconomic class or, you know, whatever, right? So you don't always see that in the interview, but it's being able to like look and see like unique life processes or unique history that people go through that sometimes helps that. So I think that like it's on people to personally do it. Like it's important to me, so like I really try to do it whenever I'm hiring or who I'm helping out with. I think there's a lot of, especially like for women in this space, there's a lot of different Discords and groups and mentorship opportunities that come up. Like AnyKey, there's a few like digital panels with, I can't think of it right now. The Peabody Center, Nixon Peabody Center does a lot of like women in gaming sort of like panels that you can see. So I think like for it's almost a little bit, I know it's like crazy for me to be like, it's a little bit easy. There's more resources for women specifically in gaming as far as like mentorship and getting experience. As far as like with different, like with people of color, right? How do we do that? It's like, and we're just now like really having a big conversation about like, how do we actively do these things? How do we change the process of our system? How do we build these pathways for people to do that? And I think we have to look at it really critically. I think that it's going to be up to people who have power to do things. Like I'm really excited with Training Grounds, the fact that I can really affect like for kids, like 13 to 17-year-old kids, and putting computers in schools for the kids that have never seen esports. They don't have access to a computer or internet at home, right? But building, like investing in those areas to start esports and gaming opportunities for kids that maybe would never have gotten the opportunity. And until we do sort of like really drastic things, I think at like the college level, it's almost too late. Like people, once they're in college, like they know that they love esports, or they're like starting to have that esports thing, where when it comes to like, how do we get more Black individuals in esports, right? Like we have to go so far back and be very drastic in how we look at it, and making sure that we're like giving them opportunities at age 10, age 13, so they're playing games and they have the exposure to esports and gaming that everybody else has.
Yeah, absolutely. And also piggyback off of that, a lot of what Cloud9 does is really critically look internally at what our systems are, look at the kind of initiatives that we build like holistically, and ensure that we are illustrating our best steps forward transparently. So for example, Cloud9 has kind of just wrapped up our Pride initiatives for this month. What we did is we actively looked to engage with an inclusivity and diversity ambassador. Amanda was a wonderful help to us. She is an incredible ambassador, highly educated in this space and wanting to challenge the esports space to be better. And when we brought her on, we ensured that she was looking really critically and able to kind of critique what we've been doing internally to create well-rounded Pride initiatives that were about Cloud9 as a brand being an ally and being a better ally. And it's not about, oh, look at us doing Pride initiatives. It was about us being well-rounded and how we're representing these initiatives and ensuring that we're uplifting creators, we're uplifting the communities that we're working with. And we're also continuously asking ourselves how we can do better and how we can challenge that. So I think that, to May's point, also being able to have the discourse right now present and being able to be very open and transparent about challenging the norms that we have, challenging the opportunities and accessibilities we have, ensuring that there is equity across esports is incredibly important, and it's incredibly key to ensuring that we aren't just a bystander in allowing, you know, this continuous inequality across esports and across the entire world to continue to perpetuate and happen. We have a lot of personal responsibility as leaders in our company to challenge our leadership, to challenge our executive level, to be questioning what we're doing, how we're creating well-rounded hiring processes, how we're shaping initiatives that are reaching out and uplifting our communities in the best, most well-rounded ways. And you know, I know that personally for May and I, this is very, 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 very core to what we do and how we shape things. So we are doing everything in our power day to day to ensure we're asking the hard questions and making sure we're bringing in voices and uplifting those voices.
And paying those voices when we ask.
And paying those voices, yes.
Yeah, right. Like that's a big thing, is like valuing anyone who, like, especially like with consulting, right? Like consulting is an actual skill, and I think oftentimes like diversity and like consultants are overlooked as far as like the value that they bring. Any sort of like business consultant that you bring, if you want someone to come in and look at your marketing, if you want someone to come in and look at just like top down anything with business, like you pay those people. And so it's really important to, I think, pay creators and advocates and consultants, whether they are from any sort of like marginalized group, right? It's more important to pay them because you validate them, you support that group just like in general by giving them validation and money. And I think that it's sort of like, it shows like real good and like real effort to sort of like want to change the status quo.
Yeah, how are we doing on time, Ricky?
That's perfect, actually. So that's the conclusion. Thank you all for joining us, both in chat and for our lovely panelists for, you know, providing such in-depth and taking all these questions seriously to, you know, help those looking to find opportunities in this industry. So that was pretty much it. That's the end of our How to Get a Job in Esports panel. Once again, special shout out to UConnect, Twitch Student, and Hitmarker for helping us with all this. And just a reminder that we are trying to raise money for the Boys and Girls Club in the Houston. Sorry, give me 1 second. Yes, so we are raising money for the Houston Boys and Girls Club benefiting underprivileged kids. So it's right below in the panel underneath. That's pretty much it. Thank you all for joining us.